On rainy days, the smell is still the first thing that comes back to me. The damp, soaked concrete smell. The metallic hum an old refrigeration unit makes when its motor turns over. And that strangely cold air that only ever lingers after someone has died. When people hear the word morgue, the first thing they think of is ghosts. But what really frightened me wasn't a ghost so much as something that kept acting like a person, right up to the very end. My name is Kenji, and at the time I was 29. I worked the night shift managing the mortuary at a funeral home on the outskirts of Hiroshima. I used to do something else. I was a night driver for a freight warehouse, but after one bad traffic accident, holding a steering wheel for long stretches became hard for me. After the crash, whenever night came, it wasn't drowsiness that hit me first but a strange kind of dread. Just the sound of brakes would set my heart racing, and any dark road without a stoplight would drag that night back into my head. But I still had to eat. I got the morgue job through a relative. Honestly, at first it scared me. But that's how people are. After a few days, even the dead become routine. In the beginning my fingertips trembled just opening the cold storage door, but after about a month I was eating cup noodles while reciting the storage numbers from memory. That funeral home was old. Not the building itself, but the location was strange. It had been carved out of a mountainside. An old communal cemetery still remained behind it, and a river ran out in front. It was fine during the day, but at night everything around it went too quiet. When the wind blew, the leaves drifting down from the mountain sounded exactly like someone shuffling toward you in slippers, and the exhaust fans turning sounded like long, drawn-out human breathing. Around 3 in the morning, especially, the air would turn strangely heavy. At exactly that hour, the automatic door at the far end of the mortuary corridor would always open, just once. At first I thought it was a sensor problem. Old building, these things happen, I told myself. But the strange part was that every time the door opened, the call bell inside the cold storage room would ring, just once. A single short, soft chime. The first time I heard it, I honestly thought my heart had stopped. The bodies that went into storage wore a tag on the wrist. The interior bell was an emergency button, built so a worker could press it if they ever got locked inside by accident. Obviously there was no one in there to press it. And yet the bell kept ringing. One chime. Just once. Every time it happened, the senior man on staff, the foreman, Sato, always said the same thing. Ignore the 3 a.m. bell. Don't go checking on it. I asked him, smiling, why not? But Sato wouldn't answer. He just smoked his cigarette and glanced for a moment toward the storage room. I still remember that expression. It wasn't the face of someone afraid. It was more like the face of a man who had been enduring something for a very long time. After about a month, I got used to it too. The bell would chime and I'd just glance at the monitor and let it go. The cameras never showed anything anyway. But that night was different. It was the end of November. Sleet was falling, a mix of rain and snow, and for some reason the emergency room kept calling. 3 traffic accident fatalities came in, and I was running around without a break until almost dawn. The crying of the bereaved families hung in the corridor for a long time, and the smell of incense mixed with disinfectant until my head ached. It must have been around 2:30 in the morning. The last of the families had gone home, and I was alone in the mortuary. That night was unusually silent. Normally I could at least hear the refrigeration motors, but strangely the quiet was so deep my ears felt stuffed. I was sitting in the office chair drinking coffee when the corridor sensor lights suddenly began switching on, one section at a time. On. On, on. Like someone was walking toward me. My body went rigid. There were no footsteps, only the lights coming on, slowly, starting from the far end of the corridor. In that instant the bell rang. Longer than usual. And right after it, it rang again. Twice. That had never happened before. I got up and looked at the cameras. The storage corridor feed was faintly trembling, crackling like it was full of static. And in a corner of the screen, something was standing. At first I thought it was a shadow. But looking closer, it was a person. Wearing something like a white hospital gown, head bowed, standing in front of the storage room door. The breath caught in my throat. There had clearly been no one there a moment ago. Thinking it might be an intruder, I took a flashlight and stepped out into the corridor. Honestly, up to that point I wasn't thinking about anything like ghosts. If anything, I figured some drunk had wandered in. The corridor was cold. The chill seemed to be pooled along the floor, my ankles ached from it. The sensor lights came on one by one, but strangely the lights on my side came on late, as if someone were passing in front of me first. I made it to the storage room door. No one was there. Not even the sound of breathing. But from inside the door came a scratching sound. A dry, scraping sound, like fingernails. I froze where I stood. The cold storage was sealed off behind a steel door, lined inside with body trays. A scratching sound coming from in there made no sense. That was when the bell rang again. This time it was close, like it came from right behind my back. I spun around on reflex. No one. But I clearly saw it. In the glass of the automatic door at the end of the corridor, someone was reflected. A person, standing, head tilted, as if they had been waiting for me to turn around. My heart started slamming. And the stranger thing was that even in that moment, my head kept trying to rationalize. I'm tired, I imagined it. It's a reflection in the glass. It's the shadow of someone passing outside. People keep searching for a realistic explanation even in impossible situations. Especially when they're scared. I deliberately swore out loud as I walked toward the automatic door. Who the hell is it? My voice shook. When I reached the door, it slid open slowly. There was no one outside. Only sleet drifting down. But the floor was wet, all the way inside the corridor, as if someone had walked in on wet feet. The footprints were only on one side. Only the left foot. They led down the corridor toward the storage room. I stood there for a long time. I wondered if I should run. But strangely, I couldn't look away. When people feel terror, sometimes they don't flee, instead they keep needing to confirm the danger. You can't breathe again until you know whether it's real. In the end I followed the footprints. The left footprint stopped in front of the storage room. And there was water on the steel door handle, as if someone had gripped it from the inside. In that moment a very small voice came from within. Cold. It was clearly a human voice. A hoarse voice. It sounded a little like an old woman, a little like a child, a strange voice. My legs really did give out. My head told me to run, but my body wouldn't move. Strangely, that voice wasn't unfamiliar. It felt like I'd heard it somewhere. And then I remembered. The accident victim who had come in a few days earlier. A woman found in a winter gorge. Someone who had gone camping alone and vanished. When she was found, I'd heard, her left foot was badly damaged. My throat clenched shut. Then the scratching came again from inside the steel door, faster this time, as if someone inside were frantically clawing at it. With a trembling hand I gripped the handle. It was colder than cold, like ice. And very slowly, I opened the door. The chill poured over my face. The lights inside were off, only the number indicators on the trays glowing faintly. The scratching came from the very back. I switched on my flashlight. The beam shook. And in that instant I saw that one tray at the very end was open just a crack. Only wide enough for a single finger. A black gap showed inside. Something moved in that gap. Slowly, like a human hand. I couldn't even scream. The flashlight beam trembled, and from inside something like a damp finger slowly pushed out. And from within the tray, a voice said, "Wrong place." In that instant every light in the storage room went out. A power outage. Total black. I stood frozen, unable to breathe. And then, right beside my ear, someone whispered. "Found you." That voice, right at my ear, didn't sound human. There was no breath mixed into it. When a person speaks, even in the faintest whisper, there's a trace of breath in it. This was bone-dry, like a recorder pressed to my ear. Cold and flat and strangely clear. "Found you." I twisted my body backward on reflex. No one. The dark in front of me was total. Because of the outage, only my single flashlight beam wavered, and only my own breathing battered the inside of my ears. But the air in the storage room had grown far colder than before. It wasn't cold so much as painful. Like shards of ice entering my lungs. Gripping the flashlight, I backed away. And my heel stepped on something wet. My heart dropped. Slowly I lowered the beam. Wet footprints. Only the left foot. But different from before. Now they came right up to my own feet. As if someone had just been standing behind me and then stepped back. I turned and ran without looking back. I shoved 3 steel doors of the storage room shut and burst out into the corridor. The sensor lights came on late, and my shadow stretched and swayed against the wall. I was so out of breath I thought I'd be sick. And then, as I ran, I felt something wrong. Behind me there were footsteps. The wet, dragging sound of slippers being pulled along. I didn't stop. I nearly fell as I ran into the office and locked the door, then immediately turned on the camera feed. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the mouse. The storage corridor feed came back. At first there was nothing. An empty corridor, lights out, wet floor. Then the bottom right corner of the screen slowly shuttered, and someone passed right in front of the camera. Too close to see a face. Instead I only saw wet hair. Long, soaking hair brushed past the lens and the static went wild. Then the camera feed died. I stood frozen. The same thought kept circling in my head. I have to get out. I have to get out right now. But the funny thing is, when people are terrified beyond reason, they make strange decisions. I decided I had to check things first before running. The power was out, so I had to look at the breaker. I had to confirm whether the cameras were broken. If I could find a rational reason, I thought it would be less frightening. But the truth is, I already knew. This wasn't because of a power outage. I took a spare flashlight from the office drawer. Then I grabbed the radio off the wall. "Foreman." No answer. "Foreman Sato, do you copy?" Only crackling static. There should have been someone in the security room at that hour too. But strangely, I couldn't reach anyone. I swallowed. To get outside I'd have to cross the corridor again. I hated that more than anything. The truly strange thing wasn't the fear itself, it was the certainty, growing stronger and stronger, that someone was out there in the corridor. The certainty that it was somewhere I couldn't see. That's what drives a person mad. I stood in front of the door for a long time. Then finally I opened it slowly. The corridor was quiet. So quiet my ears felt blocked. In the distance only the refrigeration units hummed. I walked, keeping as quiet as I could. But I'd barely gone a few steps when, from the restroom at the end of the corridor, something dropped with a soft sound. I stopped dead. And very slowly I turned my head. The women's restroom door was half open. It had clearly been shut a moment ago. Inside, the light was off. But water was flowing out from under the door, slowly, across the black tile. I held my breath. I thought I shouldn't go. But strangely my eyes kept being pulled that way. People split into 2 types in front of fear. Those who run right away, and those who keep checking until they're dragged in deeper. I was the second type. Slowly I went toward the restroom. From inside I could hear water dripping. And in between the drips, a strange sound was mixed in. It sounded like someone sobbing. Very faintly. A sound that was a little like crying, a little like laughing. I pushed the door. The fluorescent light inside flickered on. It was empty. Only one sink tap was running, and the floor was flooded. I muttered a curse and shut off the tap. In that moment I looked in the mirror. Under the door of the stall behind me, I could see a person's shadow. I thought my breath would stop. Someone was in there. I could see feet. Bare feet. Wet feet. Only the left one. I froze in place. From inside the stall came a very slow knocking. The sound of someone tapping with the back of a hand. And inside, a woman murmured, "You're there, aren't you?" My mind went white. I backed away. But my foot slipped on the water and I nearly fell, the flashlight banging against the wall. The beam swung and lit the underside of the stall. The feet were gone. They had been there a second ago. And then, right behind me, I heard breathing. I screamed and spun around. No one. But the mirror showed it. Behind me, a woman was standing. Wet hair covered her whole face, and a white gown like a hospital robe was soaked and clinging to her skin. Her left foot was gone. To be exact, below the ankle it was blurred, as if it had been crushed away. I stood frozen. The woman in the mirror very slowly raised her head. Through the hair I could see her mouth. It was opening. Like a smile. In that instant the fluorescent light went out. Total darkness. And right in front of me I heard the brush of wet hair. With my eyes shut I fled backward, slamming into the wall, almost falling, until I burst out of the restroom. But out in the corridor I realized something wrong. The layout of the corridor looked different. The office was clearly at the right-hand end, but now the corridor stretched on endlessly. The sensor lights didn't come on. At the far end of the dark corridor, only a red emergency light blinked. Cold sweat poured off me. My sense of direction had completely collapsed. And in the distance I heard it. Wet footsteps. Slowly drawing closer. I ran like a madman. But no matter how far I ran, the end of the corridor never came. My breath was bursting and my legs were buckling, but the scenery stayed the same. Red emergency light. Wet floor. Closed doors. As if I were going in circles through the same place. In that moment, very close behind me, a woman laughed. Small and short. Terrified, I looked back. At the end of the corridor someone was standing. This time I saw it clearly. A wet hospital gown. Limp, hanging arms. A woman dragging her left leg. Her head was bent strangely to the side. But the most horrible thing was her face. There were no eyes. The places where eyes should be had gone black and hollow. The woman slowly opened her mouth. "Why did you leave me?" The moment I heard those words my heart sank. That voice. I'd heard it somewhere. And then I remembered. The accident victim's family member, weeping, had said, I shouldn't have left her alone. Among the bereaved that day there had been one man. He kept reeking of alcohol and crying, and in front of the woman's body he kept repeating the same words. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I left you alone." And now the woman in front of me was saying the very same thing. "Why did you leave me?" Then the woman moved. She wasn't walking. She closed the distance in an instant, as if sliding. I screamed and turned and ran. And in that moment someone grabbed my arm hard. I thrashed like a person who'd lost his mind. But then I heard a familiar voice. "Kenji, snap out of it." It was Foreman Sato. Panting, I looked around. The corridor was back to normal. In front of the office. The lights were on. My legs gave out and I sank down. Sato's face had gone dead white. "Did you go into the storage room?" I couldn't answer. My mouth wouldn't open. Sato looked at my face for a long time, then swore quietly. "Damn it." And in a very low voice he said, "That's exactly why I told you to ignore the 3 a.m. bell." The moment he finished speaking, the bell rang again from the storage room at the end of the corridor. This time long and slow. And right after it, twice more. For the first time the bell rang 3 times. Sato's face hardened. And very slowly, looking toward the storage room, he muttered, "I said it wouldn't come out." In that instant, from inside the steel door of the storage room, came the sound of 3 impacts. The second one. And with the third blow, the steel door handle slowly turned downward. Watching that handle slowly descend, I forgot to breathe. The screech of metal friction rang long down the corridor. Sato stepped in front of me, blocking the way. But I could see he was afraid too. The veins on the back of his hand stood out white where he gripped the flashlight, and the muscles in his jaw kept twitching. From inside came another pounding. This time it didn't sound like a human hand. More like something heavy was pressing down from within. The steel door shuddered faintly. Sato spat the words out like he was chewing them. "Don't open it." I barely managed to speak. "What's inside?" Sato didn't answer. Instead, without even looking at me, he said in a low voice, "How many bodies came in tonight?" 3. 3 of them. There was a woman with no left foot, wasn't there? The moment I heard that, a chill ran down my spine. Sato swallowed slowly. That woman was supposed to be cremated today. What? But her family suddenly went silent. Stopped answering. My head went numb. I remembered. The family had clearly said they'd cremate her early tomorrow morning. And now the contact had gone dead. Sato went on. The accident happened at Sandankyo Gorge. The police said there was a lot that didn't add up. Like what? The corridor lights flickered faintly. Sato kept staring only at the storage room. The man who went camping with her kept changing his statement. First he said they'd had a quick fight. Then he said the woman went off alone. Later he said she vanished while he was asleep. Another impact rang from inside. This time, through the gap under the steel door, something began to seep out slowly. I instinctively backed away. But strangely, watching it, Sato's face only hardened further. It's starting again. Again. He kept his mouth shut for a while, then said weakly, "It's not the first time." In that moment the bell rang. Once. Right after, again. Twice. And from inside came the sound of a woman laughing. Very small. The instant he heard it, Sato suddenly shouted, "Cover your ears." I clapped my hands over my ears on reflex. And in that instant, from inside the storage room, human voices erupted all at once. "Help me. Cold. Open the door. Honey. Mom." Dozens of voices at once. Men, women, the old, children, all tangled together, ringing through the whole corridor. I collapsed where I stood. My heart pounded so fast I thought I'd throw up. Sato grabbed me by the collar and hauled me up. "Snap out of it. You can't listen to it." "What is that? What the hell is that?" Sato bit his lip. "Work the morgue long enough and sometimes you get this." "Get what?" "Things that follow you." The moment I heard that, gooseflesh rose all over me. Sato let out a trembling breath. "People say when you die, that's the end. But sometimes there's something that doesn't realize it's over." The steel door shook hard. This time the gap widened. A cold air burst out from inside like an explosion. And through that gap I saw a hand. A wet, pale hand. The fingernails were broken and black. The fingers were scraping the gap, slowly coming out. I screamed. Sato ran straight at the door and pushed it shut with his body. Kenji. Grabbed the door. Nearly crying, I ran over and grabbed the other side. It was cold. Not like grabbing a door, but a block of ice. But the force from inside grew stronger. The steel door was slowly being pushed open. And through the gap a woman's voice came. Wrong place. Her tone was strange. The voice of someone searching for somebody. More confused than resentful. Sato gritted his teeth. Don't say its name. Okay. No matter what you hear, don't answer. In that instant, right beside my ear, a voice spoke. Kenji. It was so natural that for a second I thought it was a real person. I froze. It was a voice I'd heard during the day. One of the dead woman's bereaved family. The younger sister who had kept crying. Have you seen my sister? I almost turned around on reflex. But Sato shouted, don't look. At the same time the force inside the door surged. The door nearly came open. Through the gap black hair began to force its way out. Wet hair, hanging all the way to the floor, writhing as if it were alive. I thought I was truly going to lose my mind. Then suddenly every light in the corridor came on. A bright flood of light burst in. At the same instant the movement behind the steel door stopped. Silence. Only the sound of breathing. Sato slowly took his hands off the door. And in a very low voice he cursed. The facilities guys finally got the power back on. I slid down against the wall. My hands felt frozen, no sensation in them. Sato pulled out a cigarette and put it in his mouth, but his hands kept shaking. I'd never seen him that frightened before. After a long while I asked, what is that thing? He drew deep on the lit cigarette. I don't know exactly either. Then why? Why does something like that come about? He was silent for a while. He kept gazing at the storage room at the end of the corridor, then said slowly, do you know the moment a person dies most horribly? I couldn't answer. It's when they feel they've been abandoned. Those words stuck strangely in my chest. He exhaled a long stream of smoke. More frightening than someone who died unjustly is someone who believes they were left behind, all alone. In that moment I suddenly thought of my own accident. The day of the crash. The red brake lights I saw right before I lost consciousness inside the car. And the other vehicle that fled. After that I kept having the same dream. A dream of being left alone on a dark road. A dream where no one comes. Maybe that's why the woman's voice didn't sound like someone else's problem. Why did you leave me? Those words kept circling in my head. Sato gave my shoulder a light tap. Go home for the night. But my shift, forget it. He looked exhausted. He looked truly old. I packed my bag. But before I left the office, without thinking, I looked at the camera feed. And I froze. At the end of the storage corridor a woman was standing. In an unlit corner, head bowed. But this time her face was visible. There were no eyes. Only black holes. And slowly she raised her head toward the camera. Her mouth moved. I couldn't hear the sound, but I could tell what she was saying. Found you. In that instant the screen crackled and died. I left the building almost at a run. The dawn air was cold. The sleet had stopped, but the ground was wet. Under the parking lot streetlight I could see my car. But there was a watermark on the floor in front of the driver's seat. Only a left footprint. I stopped where I stood. I felt my heart slowly tightening. Surely not, I thought. I tried to think rationally. Someone must have stepped through here. It's a coincidence. But the moment I looked at the car window, my breath stopped. On the inside of the passenger window there was a handprint. From the inside. A wet palm print. I felt my fingertips go cold. The car door had clearly been locked. And yet the handprint was on the inside. In that moment my phone rang. I almost dropped it. The caller was an unknown number. With a trembling hand I answered. Hello. For a while there was no sound. Only static. And then, very faintly, a woman said, I'm cold. The call cut off. I froze. I tried to look at the number again, but strangely there was no record of it. No missed call. The call itself had vanished. That was when, from inside the car, there was a soft sound. From the passenger side. Slowly I turned my head. And through the car window I saw it. The passenger seat was wet. As if someone had just been sitting there. And on the seat, a few strands of hair were stuck. Long, black, wet hair. In that instant, inside the car, fog very slowly began to gather on the glass. The whole inner surface turning white. And someone slowly wrote letters with a finger. Why? One word. A moment later a second word followed. Did you? And then the last word completed it. Leave me. Why did you leave me? I screamed and backed away. In that instant, in the passenger seat of the car, something slowly raised itself. Wet hair brushed the inside of the glass as it moved. And the black hollow eyes turned to look at me. I turned and ran. I'd left the car keys and my bag inside. As I ran across the parking lot my breath climbed to my throat. The rain-pooled ground was slippery, and my sneakers made wet, slapping sounds. But the strange thing was that beyond my own footsteps, there was one more. The dragging of a left foot. Right behind me. I didn't dare look back. When a person is truly afraid, they can't even check. Because until you look, it might not be true. Because the moment you look back, it might become real. I ran all the way to the smoking area beside the funeral home building. A small canopy was set up there, and a single fluorescent light flickered. No one. Of course not, at that hour. It was past 4 in the morning. Gasping, I looked back. The parking lot was empty. My car stood under the dim streetlight. The passenger seat didn't move. But I was certain. I had clearly seen it. Something rising up. I clung to the canopy pole and dry-heaved for a long time. Only bile came up. My hands shook so badly I could barely stay standing. And then a vibration buzzed in my pocket. My phone. I really didn't want to answer. But the moment I looked at the screen, my breath choked even harder. There was no caller ID. No number, no name. Just a black screen with the call button floating on it. After hesitating a long time, I answered. I said nothing. And the other end said nothing either. Not even breathing. Instead, from very far away, only the sound of water dripping. And then someone slowly walking. My heart pounded madly. In that moment, beyond the phone, a woman whispered. There you are. The call ended. I dropped the phone on the ground. And almost by instinct, I ran back inside the funeral home. Strange, isn't it? The normal thing would be to flee outside, but I went back into the building. Because in that moment the outside felt more frightening. The outside was dark and wide. The funeral home, by contrast, at least had lights, at least had a person, was a familiar space. In terror, people strangely treat a familiar place like a refuge, even if that place itself is hell. When the automatic door opened, I felt the warm indoor air. But even that warmth was strange. Air mixed with the smell of bodies and incense. The smell of old carpet. The smell of wet chrysanthemums. I leaned against the wall and caught my breath. Then from the far end of the corridor someone came walking. It was Foreman Sato. The moment he saw my face his expression hardened. Why haven't you left yet? I could barely speak. It was in my car. What was? I couldn't answer. But Sato already had the face of a man who understood. He slowly drew out a cigarette and cursed quietly. It latched on. The moment I heard that, the strength drained from my legs. Almost crying, I asked, "What the hell is it?" Sato closed his eyes for a moment. At first everyone thinks they imagined it. He lit the cigarette and went on. But at some point you realize. That thing isn't something you see because you're afraid. The fluorescent light at the end of the corridor flickered once. I looked that way without thinking. No one. But there was a feeling. The feeling of being watched. Sato let out a small sigh. "You said you'd been in an accident, right?" I flinched. "Yes. I nearly died." "Those are the ones it tends to latch onto." Irritation crept into my voice. "What's that supposed to mean?" He looked at me for a moment. "People who've gone right up to the edge of death." He exhaled slowly. "Sometimes a person comes back with the door not quite shut behind them." I hated those words. Not because they were unreal, but because, strangely, they made sense, and that made me hate them more. I snapped at him for no reason. "So you're saying it's a ghost?" Sato didn't answer. Instead he took me into the office. He opened a drawer. Inside was an old, worn notebook, its cover warped from absorbing moisture. He tossed it in front of me. "Read it." Slowly I opened it. Inside were dates and names. It looked like a work log. But from somewhere in the middle the contents turned strange. 2:17 a.m. bell rang twice. Confirmed watermarks in corridor. Storage room 4 door open. Heard a woman laughing. My fingertips went cold. The further I turned the pages, the worse it got. Began after the death of Takeda. Auditory hallucinations ongoing. No solo shifts permitted. And on the last page my hand stopped. It read, "Once it finds a target, it follows." I slowly raised my head. "Who wrote this?" Sato answered. "The previous facilities manager." "And now?" Sato was quiet for a moment. "Dead." A chill ran down my spine. He killed himself. The air in the office suddenly felt suffocating. Sato stubbed out the cigarette and went on. He said he kept hearing his daughter's voice. I swallowed. Even though the daughter was already dead. In that instant the office fluorescent light buzzed and flickered. Briefly, but enough to grate on the nerves. Sato lifted his head. The look in his eyes had changed. "Be quiet." "What?" "You don't hear it right now?" I listened. At first nothing. But soon, very faintly, I heard it. A scratching sound. Slowly. Outside the office door. I held my breath. The sound came closer and closer. Like a wet fingernail scraping the wall. Sato very slowly turned his head and looked at the gap under the door. I looked down too. And my heart sank. Black water was seeping in under the door. Slowly. More than water, it looked like hair. Wet black threads crawled in through the gap in the floor. I clamped my mouth shut and backed away. In that moment, outside the door, a woman laughed. A soft giggle. Right outside the door. Sato shot up. "We're going to the storeroom." "What?" He took a small ring of keys from the drawer. We ran down the corridor. The scratching sound followed behind us. The storeroom at the end of the corridor was a place almost never used. A place for storing old reusable goods or broken refrigeration parts. Sato opened the door and shoved me inside. It was dark and reeked of dust. He locked the door. I was nearly in a panic. Why did we come in here? Instead of answering, Sato went to a corner of the storeroom. He pulled away an old cloth. Beneath it was something strange. It looked like an old altar. An incense burner. Talismans. A blackened, burned-down candle. I stared blankly. "What is this?" Sato said in a low voice. "This place wasn't always a funeral home." Gooseflesh rose on me. Long ago it was a communal mortuary. He lifted a dust-covered memorial tablet. A place where they gathered bodies during the war. The air in the storeroom seemed to suddenly turn colder. Sato went on slowly. "That's why the people back then never came up here at night." In that moment the footsteps outside the storeroom door stopped. Silence. Not even breathing. And very slowly, a knock. Once. A moment later, another knock. And a woman whispered. "Kenji." I froze. Sato raised his hand as if to cover my mouth. And in a tiny whisper he said, "If you answer, it comes in." In that instant, through the gap under the door, wet hair began to crawl in slowly. The hair coming in under the door was like a living insect. Wet, black hair brushed across the floor and crept slowly inward. I could see each strand moving, writhing like seaweed soaked in water. I backed away, unable to breathe. Sato kept his hand over my mouth and shook his head. He meant, never make a sound. Outside it was quiet. So quiet it was more frightening. When people are in danger, the absence of sound makes them more anxious. At least if you hear something, you know where it is. But the thing outside the door had no breath at all. Only its presence could be felt. The certainty that someone was standing right outside the door. And slowly, a knock. Another knock at the door. This time a little harder. "I'm cold." The woman's voice came from right outside the door, without even the rasp of breath. I shut my eyes and bowed my head. And strangely, hearing that voice, an emotion other than fear rose up. Something like guilt. As if I really had left someone alone outside and come in. That feeling entered so naturally. Should I open the door? Shouldn't I help? Such thoughts crept up in my head. Then Sato whispered into my ear, very softly. "You can't feel pity for it." I flinched. He kept glaring only at the door. "That thing comes in through human emotion." The moment I heard that, my mind snapped clear, like someone broke a hypnosis halfway through. Cold sweat ran down my back. Outside, the woman spoke again. "You left me all alone." My chest dropped. Because, strangely, those words felt like my own story. The day of the crash. The truth is, there was something I never told the police, right to the end. Just before the accident, I'd been dozing. Only a few seconds. Because of those few seconds I saw the crossing of the center line too late, and in swerving to avoid the oncoming car, the accident happened. The other driver fled, but if I hadn't dozed off in the first place, maybe the accident never would have happened. After that day I always thought, what if someone died? What if I ruined a person's whole life? I'd never told anyone that guilt. And now, outside the door, that voice seemed to be scraping at exactly that part inside me. "Why did you leave me alone?" In that moment I nearly walked toward the door. It was truly strange. I was afraid, and yet at the same time I wanted to open the door. Sato seized my arm. "Snap out of it." That was when something suddenly fell deep in the storeroom. Sato and I turned at the same time. In the dark at the very back of the storeroom, something had toppled over. Sato shone the flashlight. It was an old picture frame. The glass was broken. In the photo were a young man and a little girl. And below the photo, words were written. Facilities Manager Takeda, daughter Saki. I swallowed. The man who'd written the notebook earlier. The manager who supposedly killed himself. In that instant, from somewhere in the storeroom, a very small breath. I thought my heart would stop. Sato seemed to hear it too. The flashlight beam slowly trembled. And at the end of the beam, a little girl was standing. Maybe elementary school age. She wore a wet one-piece dress, and her hair covered half her face. I froze. But the strange thing was, the child wasn't frightening. If anything, she looked terribly sad. The child gazed at me quietly, then slowly opened her mouth. "Ah, mister." Her voice was small. "Run." In that instant the storeroom door shook with a violent crash. A tremendous impact erupted. The whole door shuddered. Outside, the woman was laughing now. A giggle, laughter that came closer and closer. Sato grabbed the door, swearing. "Kenji. Open the back door." Frantically I searched the back of the storeroom. There was a dust-covered steel door. It was locked. "It won't open." "Undo the chain on the side." My hands shook so badly I couldn't manage it. Meanwhile the pounding on the door grew worse. The gap in the door widened. Through it, black hair pushed inward. And the woman's voice came as if laughing. "There you are." Nearly crying, I undid the chain. The door opened. A narrow staircase, smelling of mold, led downward. Sato pushed me. "Go down." "What about you?" "Hurry." In that moment the storeroom door burst open. I looked back and froze. Through the gap in the door, the woman was standing. Or rather, it was in the form of standing. Her body was abnormally long. Her arms hung down to the floor, and hair covered her entire face. Her left leg dragged, bent. And the most horrible thing was the way it moved. It didn't walk like a person. A jerk. A drag. A jerk. It moved like a broken doll. Sato shouted, "Don't look." At the same moment the woman's head snapped up. Through the hair I saw eyes like black holes. And her mouth gaped open as if torn to the ears. "Found you." I tumbled down the stairs as if rolling. Sato came down after me and slammed the door shut. From above came a heavy thud. Dust rained down. Below was an underground passage. A very old concrete corridor. Water dripped from the ceiling pipes. The smell was terrible. The smell of rotten water mixed with old incense. Sato was gasping. "I've never come down this far. Where is this?" He shone the flashlight around. On the walls I could see old writing. Dates. Names. Numbers. Like old storage records. And along one wall a long, dark red stain remained. My stomach churned. Sato said in a low voice, "It's the old corpse transport passage." In that moment, far off in the dark, I heard the sound of water. Wet footsteps. Someone was walking. Sato turned the flashlight that way. No one. But the sound kept coming closer. And suddenly, right beside my right ear, a woman whispered. "Why are you running?" I screamed and spun around. No one. But on the wall a wet handprint had appeared. Water was still running down it as if it had just been pressed there. Sato gritted his teeth. "Damn it, we took the wrong way." He shone the beam ahead instead of answering. I looked to the end of the light and my breath stopped. At the end of the passage there was a steel door, and in front of it someone was standing. A little girl. The same child I'd seen in the storeroom. She looked at us quietly, then slowly shook her head. And in a trembling voice she said, "You can't open that door." Sato asked with a hard face, "Why?" Tears welled in the child's eyes. "My dad is inside." The moment she said it, from behind the steel door came a scratching sound. And then a very familiar man's voice. "Kenji." My heart dropped. It was my father's voice. My father, who had died 5 years ago. "Son." I froze. Sato gripped my arm hard. But I couldn't take my eyes off the door. From inside, my father spoke again. Open the door for me. And right after, an impact, as if something had thrown its whole body against the steel door. The entire door shook. Dust rained from the ceiling and the rusted hinges groaned. I stood frozen. My breath jammed in my chest. From inside the door my father's voice came again. Kenji. It was such a familiar voice. The voice that laughed when he promised to buy me a baseball glove as a kid. The voice that quietly called me out when I came home late after drinking. The voice that called my name one last time as he lay on the hospital bed. A person can never forget the voice of someone they truly loved. That's what made it more horrible. Without thinking, I started walking toward the door. Sato grabbed my shoulder. Don't go. But that's not your father. I stared at the door, lips trembling. In that instant, from inside, a very small cough. Cough. I thought my heart would stop. My father had died of lung cancer. In the final stages he always coughed like that. The voice inside the door said, as if trembling, I'm cold. Son. My legs swayed. My head reeled. Should I open it? What if it's really him? What if I'm leaving him alone again? The moment that thought entered, Sato struck me hard across the cheek. I staggered and came to my senses. Gritting his teeth, Sato said, that thing speaks through my guilt. The moment I heard that, my breath jammed. From inside the door came a sudden stifled laugh. At first it sounded like my father's laugh. But it kept changing strangely. A man's laugh. A woman's laugh. A child's laugh. Several voices began to blend together. My spine froze. In that instant, through the gap under the door, black water slowly flowed out. And through that water a finger pushed out. A finger stained pitch black. The fingernails were all torn off. The finger scraped at the floor, crawling out. I screamed. Sato shoved me back. Run. But the girl, I looked for the little girl from before, but she had vanished without a trace. At the end of the passage only the two of us remained. And from inside the steel door, someone began pounding the door like a madman. The whole passage rang. Sato shouted, "Run!" We ran straight down the passage. The puddles splashed at our feet, and my breath felt like it was tearing my throat. But from behind I heard it. The sound of the steel door being ripped open. The screech of bending metal. And then a crash. The door coming fully open. I looked back and nearly froze solid. Something was crawling out of the dark. At first I thought it was several people overlapping. But no. Bodies were tangled together. Arms, legs, hair, faces. Several human shapes twisted into one mass. And from within it, dozens of voices wept at once. Don't go. Cold. Don't leave me alone. I screamed and ran. Sato grabbed my arm and dragged me. Look straight ahead. We climbed a narrow staircase. A rusted steel door appeared. Sato shoved it with his body. It wouldn't open. Behind us the splashing was drawing closer. A wet, splashing, dragging sound, as if several people were crawling along the floor in pursuit. Sato cursed and pushed the door again. I pushed with him. In that instant, from the dark behind, someone called my name. Kenji. This time it was my mother's voice. Tears sprang to my eyes. I wanted to turn around. But at the same time I knew. If I turned around, it would be over. Then the steel door flew open. We tumbled straight outside. Cold air slapped my face. Outside was the wooded hill behind the funeral home. Dawn mist lay thick over everything. Sato immediately shut the door and looped a chain around it. From inside came a thud. The door shook. But it didn't open. Sato sank down, gasping. I dropped to the ground too. My whole body shook. That was when, far up the mountain, I saw a faint light. It looked like a small lantern. Seeing it, Sato's face hardened. So that old man's still alive. Who is it? He said nothing for a while. Then he struggled to his feet. Come on. We climbed the mountain path. The dirt path was wet, and the smell of fallen leaves rose thickly. Because of the mist I could barely see ahead. But the higher we climbed, the stranger and quieter it got. No insect sounds. Not even the wind. As if the whole mountain were holding its breath. We must have climbed about 10 minutes when a small old house appeared. It was practically a ruin. Newspaper was pasted over the windows, and under the eaves hung bundles of dried herbs. The smell of incense was thick at the door. Sato knocked. Old man. Open up. After a long while, footsteps came from inside. The door opened just a crack. And an old man poked his face out. A gaunt man with sunken eyes. But the moment he saw me, his expression changed. So you brought him? Sato said, irritation in his voice. It latched on. The old man stared at me a long time, then opened the door wider. Come in. Inside it was dark. The incense was so thick my head ached. The walls were covered in strange talismans, and bells hung from the ceiling. The old man peered closely at my face. And he muttered, very low. It's opened up a lot. Exhausted, I asked, what is all this? The old man didn't answer right away. Instead he poked a finger at my chest. The place where dead things come in. The moment I heard that, my breath jammed. Sato put a cigarette in his mouth. Explain it to him. The old man slowly sat down. A morgue is that kind of place to begin with. He lit a candle on the table. A place where the dead linger longer than the living. The candle flame wavered. He went on. But sometimes there are things that have lost their way. You mean ghosts? When I asked, the old man shook his head. Ghost is too easy a word. He'd seen plenty. It isn't lingering attachment. It isn't a grudge either. Then what is it? The old man very slowly opened his mouth. Things that don't know they're dead. A chill ran down my spine. Looking into my eyes, he went on. Things like that keep searching for people. Why? Because they don't want to be alone. The air in the room suddenly turned cold. And in that moment, from outside the door, came the sound of someone walking. Wet footsteps. Sato leapt up cursing. The old man muttered with his eyes closed. It's already followed. In that instant, from outside the door, a woman whispered. Found you. And at the same time the doorknob slowly began to turn. The moment I heard that knob turning, the air in the room froze completely. Very slowly. Someone was turning it deliberately, the way you do to scare someone. Sato went straight to the door. But this time he didn't lunge at it the way he had in the mortuary. If anything, his face had gone pale. The old man sat in front of the candle with his eyes shut. And in a very low voice he said, whatever you do, don't open the door. Outside there was no sound at all. But that silence was more horrible. Someone was clearly standing right outside the door. A wet smell came in through the crack. A little like river water, a little like long-soaked hair. I could barely breathe. Then outside the door the woman laughed very softly. A giggle. And she whispered. Kenji. My body went stiff. The old man spoke without even opening his eyes. Don't react. But that voice was growing more and more familiar. Not the unfamiliar terror of when I first heard it. It sounded like the voice of someone I'd known for a long time. That was more frightening. The woman spoke again. I'm cold. My mind reeled. A feeling of pity rose up. I wanted to open the door. Wouldn't it be fine to just let her in for a moment? Out alone on such a cold night. The instant that thought came, the old man suddenly pressed his finger hard against my forehead. Hold on to yourself. My head rang. Like surfacing after being submerged in water. The old man opened his eyes for the first time. His gaze was sharp enough to make my skin crawl. That thing comes in through the feelings in your head. He looked straight at me. Guilt. Regret. Remorse. The candle flickered. It burrows in when a person is at their weakest. Outside the door the woman laughed quietly. It's true, isn't it? And very slowly she said, you left someone behind alone too, didn't you? My breath left me. Sato's eyes turned to me. The old man said nothing. My lips trembled. I'd never told that story to anyone. At the time of the accident, the truth was I hadn't been alone in the car. My friend's girlfriend had been riding with us. Yuki. Right after the crash, half out of my mind, I crawled out of the car first. In the smell of blood and broken glass, I scrambled out onto the road. And when I turned to look back, Yuki was still inside the car. I still dream of that scene. The way she couldn't move, caught in the seatbelt. But I couldn't go back to the car. I was afraid. Afraid it might explode, afraid we might be hit again. So I stepped back a few paces. Just a few seconds, only a few seconds, but in that gap the car caught fire. Yuki never got out. I never told anyone. Not the police, not my family. Everyone believed it was just an accident. But the truth is, I know. I ran. Because I wanted to live. I hid that guilt for 3 years. And now, outside the door, that thing knew it. Why did you come out alone? The woman's voice whispered. I felt like the tears would burst out of me. Sato gripped my shoulder hard. Kenji. But I was already wavering. The voice outside the door was now changing into Yuki's voice. Exactly the same. You left me behind. In that moment black water seeped in under the door. And over the water a wet hand slowly rose. A hand with all the nails torn off. The skin warped as if from burns. I couldn't breathe. The moment I saw that hand, the smell of the day of the accident came back. The smell of burning. The smell of melted plastic. The smell of blood. Outside the door Yuki said, choking. I was cold. In the end I walked toward the door. Sato tried to stop me but I collided with him. Kenji. The old man shot to his feet. Don't. But I couldn't stop. That voice was too real. I stood in front of the door. The handle was cold. Outside, Yuki whispered. Just look at me once. I shut my eyes. And I opened the door. The door opened slowly. There was no one outside. Only mist. I stood there, dazed. In that moment, under my feet, there was a wet sound. Slowly I looked down. A wet footprint. Only the left foot. The footprints led into the house. Slowly. Very slowly. Behind me. My breath froze. From behind me I heard the brush of wet hair. And right beside my ear. Found you. In that instant the old man threw something toward me. Salt. From behind me a horrible scream-like sound erupted. A sound that felt like it would split my ears. I staggered and pitched forward. Sato dragged me into the room. The door slammed shut. From outside came the sound of pounding on the door like a madness. The whole house shook. The old man scattered something quickly over the floor. The same salt. And he began to murmur fast, in words I couldn't understand. Outside, the thing was laughing. But now it wasn't a woman's laugh. Dozens of voices were mixed into it. A man. A child. An old person. The bells hanging on the walls all swung at once. The candle flickered as if it would go out. The old man shouted. "Close your eyes." At the same moment the door flew open. A cold wind burst in like an explosion. I shut my eyes on reflex. But I heard it. A splash. A dragging, splashing sound. The sound of something coming into the room. And right up close, breathing. A rotten water smell came right up to my face. I clenched my teeth and kept my eyes shut. Then Yuki's voice came from right in front of me. "Kenji." Tears came. "Look at me." I felt like I was going insane. But at the same time I heard the old man's voice. "Don't be fooled." Yuki's voice choked. "Tell me you're sorry." The moment I heard those words I almost broke. Because that one word was the thing I hadn't been able to say for 3 years. But right at that moment, a very small girl's voice came. "Mister." I caught my breath. It was the voice of the child I'd seen in the storeroom. "You can't open your eyes." In that instant the room suddenly went quiet. The pounding on the door. The laughter. The breathing. Completely. So quiet it almost hurt my ears. And very slowly, someone whispered right in front of my face. "Why won't you look at me?" I kept my eyes shut to the very end. I don't know how many seconds passed. But suddenly the old man let out a scream. On reflex I opened my eyes. And I regretted it. Right in front of me a woman was standing. No, something that had been a woman. Her face was warped as if it had half burned away, and the places where eyes should be were black. Her mouth was torn open to the ears. And in the center of that face, Yuki's face was overlaid. It smiled. "Now come with me." In that instant every candle in the room went out. And in the total darkness, dozens of hands seized my body all at once.